They called him Genghis Khan, the Great Khan, the world's conqueror. But behind his thunder of conquest stood a quiet force few remember. His daughters. Women born into war, raised in strategy, and wielded as weapons of diplomacy. In the early 13th century, as the Mongol Empire rose from the steppes, Genghis Khan looked beyond the sword. He saw that one alliance sealed by marriage could be worth more than 10 won by blood. And so he turned to his daughters, not as pawns, but as partners in his empire's grand design. Each daughter was married not for love, but for loyalty. The Khan offered them to powerful rulers, kings, khans, and tribal chiefs, on one condition: his daughter would become queen, and her husband would serve the Mongol Empire. A bond of marriage became a bond of power. Altani, Alakai, Chechiagan, Tumalan, their names may be lost to most of history, but their influence stretched across the vast frontiers of Asia. Where armies couldn't reach, they ruled. Where men fell to blades, they held nations together. One by one, Genghis Khan's daughters became governors of conquered lands. They managed trade routes, commanded troops, and crushed rebellion in their father's name. Some ruled from yurts that stretched across deserts. Others held courts by great rivers where silk and steel flowed together. Each was a thread in the web that held the empire strong. Yet their marriages were not fairy tales of peace. They were forged in danger. When Genghis Khan gave his daughter to a foreign ruler, he often sent her with an army. If the husband betrayed the Khan's trust, that army would not hesitate to remind him of his vows. The daughters were diplomats and conquerors. Among them, Alakai Beki stood as one of the most powerful. Married to a ruler in the West, she governed her territory so wisely that even her enemies respected her name. She turned warring tribes into allies, opened trade routes, and maintained order where men had failed. To her people, she was not the Khan's daughter. She was their queen. In these alliances, Genghis Khan found something remarkable. His empire expanded not only through fear, but through family. Each daughter extended his reach into distant lands without drawing a sword. Through them, he built a network of loyalty stretching from Mongolia to Persia, a living map of bloodlines and treaties that kept the empire alive long after his death. But history, written by men, often silenced their names. The chronicles spoke of conquests and battles, not of the women who ruled the conquered. Yet the truth lingers in fragments of letters, in local legends, in the quiet survival of places once governed by Genghis Khan's daughters. They were warriors in veils, generals without glory, queens who kept an empire breathing while the world burned around them. When the Khan died in 1227, his empire stood as the largest the world had ever seen. And in its foundations were the unseen hands of his daughters, the diplomats, rulers, and protectors who bound the fractured world together. Centuries later, their legacy remains hidden behind the shadow of their father's legend. But their story is the missing half of the Mongol Empire, a reminder that even in an age of warriors, power sometimes wore a woman's face. Because Genghis Khan conquered with his armies, but he ruled the world with his daughters.